So hopefully that works for everybody and we know where we're going with the presentation. And I just need this to advance. There we go. All right. The Accredited Speaker Program, which was formed a number of decades ago, was designed for professionals who want to combine their subject matter expertise and their platform presentation mastery. And there are 2 levels to the program. So those of you who are not familiar with, the first one is a videotape presentation up to 45 minutes in length. And then if a candidate is successful in passing that, then they have to do a live presentation. And the bigger challenge these last few years has been that they're having to do very short presentations just because of the number of people that we have on the platform and pursuing the designation. Couple things for those of you who want to tap into some more information. You can access some information, general information about the accredited speaker on the Toastmasters website. So we've got that up on the screen for you, toastmasters.org/membership/accredited speaker. And there is also an accredited speakers website, which has some additional information on there as well. One of the things I want to do is commend everyone because I think it's great that you have formed clubs and are helping each other become more professional and pursue designations. We didn't have that when I was going through. It was you kind of talked to some people that you knew and a lot of things you had to figure out on your own. So it's a great resource that you have and are providing your members. So that's you're to be commended for that, and I think it's a great thing. For the questions and comments, if you can hold those off or put those in the chat box, and I'll try to get those and answer those at the end of towards the end of the presentation, not right at the end. All right, one of the most interesting things for me being the chief judge, the speakers who had clearly passed in my mind, and keep in mind, in my role as chief judge this year, I was not actually judging. So I was a little bit removed from the process. I was paying attention to what was going on. But of course, I was mentally gauging what was going on as well. Those people who, in my mind, had clearly passed, interestingly enough, when I did let the candidates know how they did and debrief them, the ones who were most, who clearly passed were also the most nervous. And that was really interesting to me. Those who were kind of borderline, not nearly as nervous. And one of the speakers whom I will not identify by name, he said, I was so nervous, and I said, you should be, because if you're not, and not that my goal is to turn you into nervous speakers, but you should have a level of concern about what you're doing in your presentation. All right, I do have a disclaimer that I have to give right at the beginning. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm just offering my perspective. It's one person's perspective on the program. And then I have a disclaimer to the disclaimer, which is I do have the fortune of having passed level 1 and level 2 on the first attempts. So I've had a chance to judge afterwards. And the feedback I received when I did my level 2, when the judges were meeting, they said, well, he clearly passed. The question is, what kind of feedback do we offer him? And that was part of my goal in my presenting, was to make it as easy for the judges as possible. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Now, you might be thinking about the title. Why did I come up with the title that I have, which is, before I do that, actually, I'm a little bit ahead of myself here. A little bit about my background, just very quickly. I know the long version is fascinating to me, but I'm sure you only want the short version, and we'll keep it that way. So I went through Toastmasters. I did serve as club president, district governor, which of course is now district director, and I was on the international board of directors. I judged level 1 and level 2 during this time. Things were a little bit different in those days in the program. So because I was speaking professionally, I got asked to do the judging and be involved in the process, which did give me a bit of an advantage when I went through the program. I had a pretty good understanding of some of the things that were going on. And I'll talk specifically a little bit more about level 1 and some of the challenges associated with that. So I was accredited speaker number 45. That was in 1998. And then afterwards, I also judged level 1 and level 2 multiple times. And of course, I was the chief judge this year, as was mentioned. in the introduction. Over the years, I've earned 2 DTMs. Don't be impressed. That just means I didn't have enough hobbies. And then I won the humorous speech contest at the district level. You'll see why that's important in a little bit later in the presentation. I also won the table topics contest at the district level. So I was involved in doing some speech contests in the mix there as well. Thanks for the applause. I was doing public and paid seminars consistently since my 714th presentation. And then my accredited speaker presentation, that was my 1,267th presentation. And then today's presentation is 2,709. So not only do I keep a log of what I'm doing, but not so much now, but in the early days, I kept pretty good notes about what was working and what was not working to help me in my own development as I was going through the program. All right, asking the right question. How many of you struggled with at least one course in school? Okay, all right. So I'm in good company. You know, there may be some straight A students in listening in on the call. I just refer to them as the weird and boring ones. And the rest of us had to struggle with at least one course in school. And if you think about it, whether it was you or somebody else, you know, there were students who said, well, how do I pass? And that's kind of what I call those people who just wanted to get through the course. They learned what they needed to learn to pass the course, and then they promptly forgot everything that they learned. Whereas those people who seemed to do better, they asked a different kind of question, such as, how do I learn this subject and get the best grade possible? So they kind of had two objectives. I got to learn this and I've got to do this. And those are the people who, interestingly enough, even if they didn't get a great grade, they really remember the course. They remember how hard they worked. They remember what they learned. And things come back to them in really, really funny ways. So, you know, one of the courses I struggled with in university was statistics. And I know everybody has to do that. Most people hate doing it. And I mean, you know, I worked through it and I said, okay, they think it's important, et cetera. And then in the last few years, I've sat in meetings where they talked about the statistics. And as they were talking about the statistics, I went, now I know why that course paid off. So it was one of those, I know exactly what they're talking about and why they're talking about it that way. So the questions that I'd like you to think about in relationship to the accredited speaker program, one is, why do I want to become an accredited speaker? And there's some people who can't answer that question. And sometimes I've had people say, I want to become an accredited speaker. And I turn the question around and I say to them, well, why do you want to become an accredited speaker? And that's part of it. But the other part that's more important is, what must I become to earn the accredited speaker designation? So it's a different question. It leads you in a different direction. And these are the kinds of questions that people might start asking themselves as they're trying to do this. So what must I improve in my content? Is my material just cut and paste? Or am I presenting the latest research and insights? And so I hope Greg doesn't mind. I'm going to refer to a little bit of our discussion in the debrief. Some of the things that Greg was talking about, I know, and I know the subject matter really well. One of the things I complimented Greg on was that the fact that he was up to date on his research and knew his research really well and incorporated that into the presentation. And you never know who in your audience knows the material and knows it well. I mean, Greg would have had no idea that I knew that material really well. And so he was, you know, wasn't giving me something that was 20, 30 years old. He was talking about the latest things that we know in research in relationship to the subject matter. So those are some of the things. Are you doing any aha moments, things from, what about your application of ideas and concepts? And then, am I telling the material really, really tightly and to the point? And that, especially in the presentations that I've seen so many times, that's one of the biggest challenges for speakers, both at level 1 and at level 2. And then what about things from the delivery standpoint? You know, what feedback have I received and what feedback have I incorporated? And so those are some of the challenges that people have, and they sometimes don't pay attention to them. Even from the vocal standpoint, am I difficult to understand or difficult to hear? Am I monotone? And asking other people for their honest feedback to get some help with that as well. So those are some aspects in relationship to that. Now, I don't just want to talk about it in an abstract form. I'm also going to share some of my insights into this just from personal experience. In my club, and this was well before I became district governor, so this is early on in my Toastmaster days, a club member got up and evaluated me, and he said, "I've never heard Kai give a speech with any humor. And Kai, I challenge you to give a speech with humor in it." So he said, "Your content's great. We've just never heard you say anything funny, and I challenge you to do that." And it was really a big challenge, and he made the challenge to me in front of all the other club members. So I took on the challenge. Of course, they announced it in the objectives, Kai, and my evaluator that night said, "Well, as we all know, Kai's objective tonight was to be funny, and as we all already know, he wasn't." And that was a major ouch factor. I did the only logical thing. I started to sob uncontrollably. And so, of course, club members comforted me, and they threw that evaluator out of the club. No, that's just my fantasy version. But obviously, it was a bit of an ouch factor. It took me 7 times. That's 7 different speeches, not the same speech. 7 different speeches before I finally got a laugh. And when they laughed where I didn't expect the laugh, and I had no idea why they found it funny. So, it was a painful experience, and I just want to be able to share that. When we talk about the skill development, people sometimes look at it and think, oh, well, you've done all these things in Toastmasters, but just like you and every other Toastmaster, I've had to learn along the way. And sometimes it's been painful, sometimes it's been embarrassing. That's part of the journey. The one tip I can give you in relationship to your skill development, which I think will be helpful for some of you, if you have a skill area that you are trying to develop, or an evaluator has suggested, or maybe several club members have suggested that you work on, I would encourage you to do this. Just focus on that one skill. Make an effort to maintain the skills you've already developed so you don't lose those, and then really work on that one skill till you are able to do it and do it quite well. And then you can go ahead and build on some of the other skills. So if that was one tip I'd have, that would be it in relationship to that. All right, question I frequently get asked: what do the judges want? Clear structure, clear structure, clear structure. It's the basics of speech on steroids is the best way to think about this. You have an introduction, and then a couple minutes later, we're not sure that what you're talking about, what was the introduction and where was this supposed to go. That's been a big, big problem. I'm going to mention something to you. This has come out of many conversations over the years, especially at the level 1 judging. So what was the opening, and did it lead to the promised content? And judges often end up forgetting. If you have a 5-minute story in your opening, it's too long. If you start out by saying, gee, it's nice to be in Winnipeg, it's not as cold as I thought it would be, and everyone's really friendly, that's just wasting everybody's time. If you start out with something like this, I had a funny moment this summer. I was talking with 5 other speakers as we were having a casual conversation. Skip all of that. You really have to be tight on time. And you basically have to think about it this way. Here's my subject. Here's why it matters to you. And here's some things that might be helpful to you. Think about it this way. Is it interesting? Is it intriguing? Is it tight? And does it lead into your subject matter? And sometimes we have something that we think works, and it doesn't. And that's kind of hard. And we have to step back and really think of another way to do it. I will tell you this. Judges really want you to succeed. And there's a very good reason for that, because if you're judging level 1, excuse me one moment, if you hear a lousy opening, and I'm talking about the first 5 minutes, you are in absolute dread, because usually the presentation doesn't improve. And have never met a judge who did not do the courtesy of listening all the way through. But basically, you're thinking, I've got another 40 minutes of painful listening. So if you really have to work on something, get that structure across, make it crystal clear, really get that opening. Because if people don't know it and don't understand where you're going with it, they just know. It's virtually everybody who's judged it at least more than once. We know within the first 5 minutes. And we do the courtesy unless it improves significantly. It never has on any presentation I've listened to, but it was just pretty painful to go through that process. So you don't want to be able to, you don't want to make it that difficult for people to do. Now, let me give you the professional aspect to this one in relationship to what I'm talking about. When I was getting ready to apply for the program, I had my presentation recorded. 3 weeks went by, and in those days we didn't do video, we just did audio. And so I got in the car and I popped it in to listen to it. So this is 3 weeks after I've had the recording. I haven't listened to anything in between. Got in the car, put it in. 10 minutes into the presentation, I realized I hadn't been listening for the last 5 minutes. And I want you to think about that. It was my presentation. It was my content. It was my voice, and I wasn't paying attention to it. And I thought, you've got a serious problem here. So I did not apply that year. I just said, there's not enough time to redo this, and you forget about applying. You're not ready to apply. I redid the process a year later. And again, I waited 3 weeks after I'd had it professionally recorded, opted in, and at the end of the presentation, I was still with the presentation, and I thought, okay, I think you've done about as well as you can, and let's hope that passes with the judges. So I was just that tough with the things that I was trying to get across on there. So what I'd like you to think about when you're doing this is, how do I make it easy for the judges to pass me? So some of the things I was just talking about, if you've got the judges, you've got a really captivating opening, they know where you're going to go with it. I'll just use the number 3. It doesn't have to be 3, but they know where you're going with the points and the illustrations. That's going to make a difference. So, how do I make it easy for the judges to pass me? I've given you an insight that a lot of speakers are unaware of, but it's really that first 5 minutes, and it can be pretty painful for the judges. So, and by the way, if you've done a really good job and the judges here are really good, when they're like, finally, something great to go through, they really get excited at that point. So it works in your favor to do that and really think about it in that context. The aspect, as I'm sharing this with you, is be harder on yourself than any judge would be. And that may be hard to do. How many of you have taken the feedback and incorporated it and put it into the presentation? My advanced club that I used to belong to before I moved here to Florida, we used to do this. Somebody would give a presentation, we'd give them feedback, and especially if they were doing the presentation elsewhere, and we had a lot of that, then we would say to the member, no, we're going to take a break. We want you to take the feedback and redo the speech right now. And they would do that. And we saw this measured improvement, and then they would come back to the next meeting to do that. So have you taken the feedback and incorporated and done it over and over again? All right, I want to take a moment because I want to involve all of you, and this is going to be an individual exercise. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and I'd like you to make a few notes for yourself. And this is something that you can think about and work on afterwards. So the first question I have for everyone: who is the best presenter you've ever heard? The presenter who resonated with you, had an impact with you. Who's that person? If you've got more than one, that's okay. All right, the next thing I want you to think about is, what one skill did she or he do better than you do. Maybe it was something in the content, maybe it was something in the delivery. Next question I have is a little bit tougher. Have you attempted to integrate that skill into your presentations? Now, I want to be clear on one thing. I'm not saying that you're copying exactly what that person does, but that you're taking that skill and making it your own. All right, next question is a little bit tougher. If the answer is yes, that you have done it, would you be able to refer me to 3 people who would agree that yes, you have incorporated that skill into your presentation style? So here's my recommendation. Ask those 3 people, those 3 trusted people, before anybody else would ask them. In other words, have that candid conversation. Here's the skill I'm working on. Have I really incorporated? Do you see me developing it? Do you see me making it my own? Now, sometimes that's kind of a tough conversation that we end up having, or at least it's uncomfortable. And, you know, I talked about the discomfort I've had in other situations. It's still an ongoing part of the process. So a few years ago, I did a keynote at a district conference. And when I was done with it, it didn't feel quite right. I'd done a workshop, which went really well. And then I'd done the keynote, and I really wasn't too happy with it. So there was another credited speaker who's a friend of mine, and I sent him a follow-up email, and I asked him for some feedback. And I got a really short feedback from him, which was fine. He said, delivery was spot on, message not so much. And people always cite me for my content. And so that really was a little bit of an ouch factor. And I thought, yeah, you felt it. It didn't feel quite right. And now you're getting that feedback. By the way, I did the only logical thing. I thought, who needs this? He is no longer a friend, and I've got another friend who loves everything that I do. I'm just kidding, of course. Sometimes when we get the feedback, it's a little bit tough to take. And, you know, you have to be grateful that you're getting this. I hope you're paying attention to what I just shared with you here. I was the one who was unhappy with it first. And so just trying to pay attention to that. You want to be able to raise your level of awareness so that you get a sense of how's your material coming across? How is your presentation coming across? We'll never have 100% feel for it, but we want to get as good a feel for it as possible so that we can have more successes and fewer failures. All right, what I'd like to do is open it up to you for questions and answers, and take some time to do that as well. All right, I may be at a disadvantage. I don't have the chat box showing up on my screen for some reason.
There are no questions in there that you're asking. The only people are asking if it will be recorded and whether that will be accessible. Yes. The answer is yes to, yeah. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Are you able to hear us? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
My question to you is, when we reach out to these 3 people, what specifically would you like us to ask them?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is tell them the skill that you're trying to incorporate into your presentations, whether it's from a standpoint of content or standpoint of delivery. And then to have them specifically look for that and then give you feedback on that. You know, when I was trying to incorporate the humor, that's a pretty obvious one. I mean, you know whether or not that's working because you just don't get any audience response. So there are other things that we may be trying to work on which are not nearly as obvious to people. So, for example, this wasn't somebody who was trying to pursue it from a professional standpoint, but just a new club member. I'll just use a rather obvious example. You know, a relatively new Toastmaster who is nervous, and they show signs of nervousness at the beginning of their presentations, but they don't really show it anyplace else. And so, trying to get them grounded and start off in a calm manner, that's something that you could actually measure, engage, and give them feedback on. So that would be one type of example that would be kind of obvious, kind of obvious in terms of here's what I'm trying to incorporate, here's what I'm trying to get across. So those are some ways. What might be the other one? From professional level, this is a big one that comes up. Many times we're trying to make a point in our presentation and have our audience walk away with that point, but it doesn't come across. So when the audience is done, we're done with a particular section, the audience isn't quite clear what was the message we were trying to get across. So that would be something that you could be working on and seeking feedback on. So those are just two quick examples.
A couple of questions here, Kai. TK O'Geary, how long was your talk at level 2?
All right, a little bit different in those days. Mine was actually 50 minutes, and I did it at a regional conference. We don't have regional conferences anymore. And one of the reasons we had an option in those days, so if you passed level 1, you could do your level 2 presentation at a regional conference or at the international conference. Because most of my work is training work and seminar work, I was aware that at the regional conference, I could get a bigger time slot. And so I had 50 minutes, which was perfect. It was perfect seminar timing. That did not go as well as I would like to think. There was a funny moment in this. I'd say maybe 6 weeks out. I'm doing a dry run with some Toastmaster friends. And right in the middle of my presentation, one of them stopped me and said, "You need to stop." And I said, "Did I do something wrong?" They said, "Now, how far are you in your presentation?" I said, "Halfway." They said, "You're done. You're out of time." So I had to go back and really work on getting the timing down. But I had the luxury of having 50 minutes. And even with that, I really, really had to work hard on it. These days, what we're seeing at the level 2, about 20 minutes. That's it. So that's even harder and tougher.
I'll see. Sorry, did I say that out loud?
Yeah, you're allowed to, Greg.
When you bombed, did you perceive a loss of some of your confidence? And if so, how did you get it back? This is JA part.
Yeah, I had actually, this was a paid engagement that I did, and it was just a horrible day. And it was one of those days where I thought, what am I doing? And am I doing the right thing? And I was really feeling down. So I called a good Toastmaster friend of mine. I was on the phone with her, and she just helped me out and see things differently and really got me focused on, okay, well, you're presenting tomorrow. What are you going to do tomorrow to fix what went wrong today? And then the next day went better, but it was really one of those things where you got to reach out for it. Part of it is you have to kind of lick your wounds, and that's not easy. It hurts, but talking to people who know you best and know what you're capable of doing can go a long way. The challenge you may have, and this is sometimes a question you need to ask, is, am I getting enough feedback from people that say, yes, I'm on the right track? Or am I the only one who's saying it? And I'm going to use an example from my regular Toastmaster club. We had a member who joined, and she told us she was a professional comic. The only problem was she wasn't funny. And she was doing a presentation one night. She had these 2 puppets, and then she turned to us and said, "Laugh, that was funny. You need to laugh here." And then now out of nervousness, we laughed because we couldn't believe what we were seeing. And then she said, "No, laugh harder." And so if we hadn't lived through that experience, she was the only one who thought she was funny. And she joined another club where she managed to find 2 or 3 people who thought she was funny and told her what she wanted to hear. but she never really said about learning how to be really humorous or humorous in a way that other people got it. So, there are things that happen where, with those situational humors where you have to be there for it to be funny, and it's really hard to describe. And that's fine as long as you recognize that. So sometimes somebody asks me something, I'll say, no, it was really only funny if you were there, but if you want to hear it, I'll be happy to share it with you. Versus something that almost always works with audiences where they think, yep, that's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Another question from TK. I can answer this one. Was your level 1 or 2 speech one you would give outside Toastmasters as is, or did you customize for a Toastmaster audience?
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and give your answer first, and then I'll give mine.
Yes, it's something that I would do outside Toastmasters. I would never customize it for a Toastmasters audience in the accredited speakers program. Here she goes on, or they go on. TK goes on to ask if was it highly customized. No, it wasn't customized at all, because this is what I do in my professional presentations. So that's what I did, because it was the best of what I was.
All right, and my answer to that one, level 1 was a specific presentation for a specific group. It was kind of a one-off that I had been asked to do and was happy to do. Had the experience in the background, and then I just thought about how do I do it and put it together. Level 2 was clearly from my work, the work that I do on a regular basis. The one thing I did do, and I had the ability to do that, because I wanted some humor in that particular program, and I'll tell you what it was on. I really did a 50-minute presentation because I teach a lot of writing. It was on how to write a better resume, or more importantly, how to get your Toastmasters experience into your resume so that it would have power in your resume. It's not the word I'm looking for at the moment, but it would have gravitas. That's the word I was looking for. It would have gravitas on your resume. So I was showing people how to take your Toastmaster experience, incorporate it into your resume. What I did, and this is the part I customized, I asked well-known Toastmasters in that region for their resumes. And then I got full permission to use parts of their resumes, everybody I knew, and I poked fun at their resumes as well. But what I did for that was every single person knew exactly what I was going to do, exactly where I was going to poke fun, and they all gave me the okay. So I was actually able to tell the audience right up front, by the way, I'm going to show you sections of people's resumes that you know. I'm going to poke fun at it. They already know, and they've approved and said, yes, I can poke fun at their resumes in this way. So just to give you a quick example, Terry Daly, who's actually from Winnipeg originally, past international director, past international president. He is an accountant by training, and I showed his resume at the beginning, and I put it on hot pink paper. And so I said, there's one way you can get attention like Terry Daly did here with his hot pink paper resume. So that was the kind of thing that I did. I had a little bit of fun with it, and that was the customization I did. I did it mainly from the standpoint of because they had Toastmasters experience, I wanted to take some of that and show it. And also, I took some of the other things out of their resume and poked a little bit of fun with it. Fortunately for me, everybody approved of it. They said, yeah, I don't have any problem with that. You go right ahead and have some fun with it.
Another question. Hi, Bob Cooley, by the way, but Bob's in for a little bit. You think it is as hard to pass level 1 or 2 today as it was years ago?
Short answer, yes.
Okay. They also went on to say, I saw your speech in Chicago, Greg. It was excellent, but I didn't want to read that part.
That's okay.
Hey, Greg, I have a question. Greg?
Yes?
Hi, Kai, it's Art, and I have a question. You talked about the importance of the opening. How important is the closing?
The closing needs to be pretty strong as well, but you know, if in the closing, if the closing is a little bit softer than the opening, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So what I mean by that is if you had a great opening and you had three things you wanted to get across, and I know what those three things were as a judge, and then you come to the end and the ending isn't a gripper, but it's good, it's solid, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So the problem is if you have a weak one. But with the closing, at that point, they just want to hear that you've got a nice way of wrapping it up. They're not terribly, most judges aren't terribly concerned that you didn't end it with a really super powerful close.
Thank you. Yes, Dorian?
My name is Joanne. I was in your audience in 1998. It was pretty dangerous last year. I still remember the basic topic that you were going on about. And I want you to know that I came back to Winnipeg just wanting to be a better speaker. And changed my style. And I really put a lot of that onto you as a great model of
Okay, I could not hear that question.
He just, wait, no. He just wants to repeat it.
Phrases.
It wasn't really a question. I just thought you were great.
She heard you in 1998 when you did your presentation there. And
Oh, okay.
she returned to Winnipeg determined to change how she spoke to become as good as the great Cod.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a very nice compliment.
Anybody? Nothing else in chat.
All right. Any additional questions?
Yeah, did you survive the tornado that was there, or were you away from it?
We were fortunate. We were out of harm's way. So you know, when these events occur, I appreciate the question. When the events occur, it's pretty devastating for some communities. And I don't know how Mexico Beach, which is where the hurricane came ashore, I don't know how they're going to manage. They really got hit hard. Other parts will be able to recover. I was actually down in Key West. I was actually down in the Keys, not just Key West. They got hit. They got the direct hit for Irma when it came ashore as a Category 4. They're pretty much back up and running. So down here in Florida, they're pretty used to bouncing back up pretty quickly. I don't think that's going to be the case for Mexico Beach in particular. It's going to take them some time to get back up. But from what I've heard, other communities are going to get back up and running in a reasonable amount of time.
Thanks. Hey, any other questions? Any other questions from our friends that are there on Zoom?
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing in the chat box.
Oh, very helpful.
EK says very helpful to everyone and very helpful.
Good. Well, most of us who are accredited speakers feel that way. We're always happy to answer questions and help out whenever we can. If there are no other questions, I'll just move into some things for you to consider as we're closing up. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right. Good. All right. There are a couple things that I hope I've managed to do tonight. One is I hope I've shared some ideas which will be helpful to you. And the other thing I want you to think about is that I did take some time to put in, I hope the preparation that I put in is obvious. And one of the reasons that I bring this up, we sometimes get this with people who are pursuing professional things. One of the people that I had the opportunity to meet, interview, and interact with was Joel Weldon. For those of you who don't know Joel Weldon, he's a professional speaker, but he's also a former Toastmaster, and he's one of those rare individuals who received a Golden Gavel Award from Toastmasters. So to give out the Golden Gavel Award, it's extremely rare for them to give it out to a former Toastmaster. And Joel in his presentation talked about stoplight speeches. The way he referred to them was, you know, those of you who are on the agenda and you write your speech while you're stopped in traffic at a red light on your way to the club. And what he was saying was, you're not doing yourself any favors, and you certainly aren't doing your club members any favors as well. I just had it happen a couple weeks ago in my club where a member said, I'm going to ask to be moved back a week. I'm not quite ready for that. And I thought that was a great call for that particular speaker, because he'd been working on it, but he wasn't quite ready. And he really wanted to be able to make things a little bit easier and a little bit better. So I'm going to encourage all of you, you know, no stoplight presentations, unless it happens to be your objective to, you know, think on your feet. Great, give me the topic, let me put something together. One of the things that people don't think about is most of the accredited speakers that I know who've achieved the designation spent a few hours every week, somewhere from 8 to 12 months preparing for level 1, and then doing the same thing for level 2. So when people talk about the time commitment, most of the people I know, and sometimes those people who aren't successful at level 2 the first time, they start working on their presentation the very next day for the next year. And you know, when you talk to people who do that, that's exactly the kind of time, and they're spending a couple hours every week working on it. So that's the kind of level it takes. And the question that I'd like all of you to think about is, what does it take to be professional, which a lot of you are thinking about. And it's really a lifelong, ongoing commitment to excellence. And the way it goes with me is I look at what I did when I was going through my accredited speaker designation. And of course, when I do a presentation, the question I ask myself right afterwards is, okay, what's the one thing you could do better the next time? And so I'm evaluating myself and always looking for what's the one thing I could do a little bit better the next time. Or something didn't quite go quite right. Why didn't that quite work, and what do I need to do a little bit differently? So that's always an ongoing process. And what I will share is I had lunch with one of the accredited speakers who's a good friend of mine when we were at the convention in Chicago. We took some time and had lunch together. And we both had very similar sentiments that going for the accredited speaker designation was great. It really helped us develop and improve our skills. But more importantly, that wasn't the end. That was a milestone in the journey, and we just kept developing the skills, and we're still pressing ourselves to develop better skills. I wish the same for all of you on your journey, that you develop the skills, you become better speakers, you become more professional, but it doesn't just stop when you achieve a designation, that you continue to grow and share that excellence with your audiences, but more importantly, help yourself refine your message and make it really, really that much better. So thank you, all of you, for the invitation. It's been a delight to do this. And I think that's a first for me, speaking to members of 3 clubs at once in different locations. So that's been a treat as well. And with that, I wish all of you a good night.
Well, thank you very much, Kai. On behalf of Keystone Speakers, GoPro, and As We Speak, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your tremendous insight. I learned a lot tonight that I'm going to take and put into my own presentations. So again, thank you from all of us, and have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Big thanks from GoPro Speakers. Thank you very much for sharing this opportunity.
You're welcome.
All right, and we'll have a link to everyone where the video is being hidden, so you can access it and you can pass it along to your club members only. That's just for the guests in the room here. All right, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bob's going to come out next Wednesday.
Good night.
Good night.
Nice for Bob. You know where you're speaking at all, Bob? Because maybe we can arrange to be there. You're muted, by the way, Bob.
I just got the agenda that said that I was 6 p.m. keynote speakers ? Present like a pro ? So
6 p.m.
I'm assuming that's something that that you guys have worked out with Tekla. So
Sure, must be.
Yeah, must be. We just found out about it when you told us. So thank you. We appreciate that.
well, I just found out about it too. I asked her earlier, and she said, "Well, I just heard something from them, and then I just got something as I was coming on the call, and I went, hey, way to go."
All right, we'll put something together. We'll be in touch. We'll put something together for next week.
Okay, so we'll see you in a week or so.
You bet. Thanks, Bob.
I'm off to District 22 in the morning.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.